And so, welcome to the Schmidt House. This house, by the way, the first part of it was built in 1904 for the founders of the brewery, Leopold Schmidt and his wife Johanna. And then in 1911 is when the extension was built. And there's been many generations of Schmidts that have lived here. Bob Krim, who's standing in the back here, gives guided house tours of this house, and we have a schedule of that if you'd like to pick one up before you leave. And he has 60 years worth of stories about the Schmidts, and he guides you through each room and has a million of stories, and I think you'll really love it. There's a lot of stairs to go up and down, so be aware of that, but it's great. So our guest today is Sandra Crowell. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, you are.
Crowell, okay. Yes. I wanted to say Crowell.
Sandy is fine.
Sandy is fine, okay, good. She's a history author, and she's worked on many books, and she'll talk about those during this presentation here. There's some about northern Idaho, and also she wrote a book for a history of Lewis County, and a land called Lewis, written back in 2007. And it's probably a good thing that she did that, because now she has that experience to draw upon as she has her latest assignment as a history of Thurston County book. And so she's going to take some of the things that she learned there. And there's a whole bunch of us contributors to this book, and trying to coordinate us all and edit it down is going to be I mean, she could have a book as thick as the Webster's on a Bridge when you think of Thurston County history from its beginning. And we're actually beginning prehistory when we talk about the early people that hunted elephants in Thurston County, mastodons and saber-toothed tigers. They have archaeological evidence that talks about that. So this book will start there and end up in the present time. So anyway, she's taken on this challenging project, and we are just glad to have her here today to talk about it. I've been looking forward to this. Let's welcome Sandy Crowell.
Thank you, Don. You know, it's really an honor to be here. Okay. Squeeze. Especially in this lovely setting, and imagine to be just immersed in this history all day like Don and Karen and Bob are, and for us to be here even for an hour. So I'm just delighted to be able to tell you about the upcoming book about Thurston County. First, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background. No, I don't have deep roots here. I've lived in the Thurston County and Lewis County areas about 30 years. And these days that doesn't count too much because, you know, many of you have probably spent your whole lives living here, and along with your great-grandfathers like Don, was it your great-grandfather that named Trosper Road? And many others who have just very deep roots. But what is nice is that like Don pointed out, I can provide some background. And what I like about doing this is that if you were to take a whole big pie and imagine cutting out a piece, what we're doing here is a piece of Northwest history. And any of the books that I've done before, there are so many factors that influence history. It doesn't just stand all alone, all by itself. So I'd like to just briefly tell you about some of the projects I've been involved in. My first experience was Up the Swiftwater, which is a book about the St. Joe River in North Idaho. And the St. Joe runs through canyons so deep you lose the sunshine part of the year. And the legacy of that book has been just really kind of amazing to me, because people will actually, although it's been published a long time ago, people will actually take that book when they go hunting out in the woods and use it as a reference. So I know in my soul of souls that how important these kind of books are to people, and how the book about Thurston County will be a true legacy that people can be proud of and share with their families and with a lot of other people. And that it lasts. It's, you know, I say that I've had several children, my two adult children, but these other children too, who tend to take on a life of their own after they're published. Then I did a short pamphlet, Whaling off the Washington coast, about the old whaling station out of Westport. This one, The Land Called Lewis, that came out, as Don said, in 2007, is really a pretty comprehensive view, and it's a survey. It's the broad brush, and that's what we're going to be attempting to do with the book about Thurston County. And because of the graphics and so on, a lot of pictures, it serves as kind of, I think kind of a good model for what we're doing. But of course, it's going to have its very own personality and not be like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here and tell you more about that. Am I still on? Yes. This is the tentative title that we've chosen. And I do want to give a caveat here to say that what I'm going to be presenting may not necessarily be cast in sandstone because this is still a work in progress. So the tentative title is Water, Woods, and Prairies, and we've added the history of Washington's capital county. And we may alter that, as I said, but the interesting part about this is that it's written not by one author, but it's written by many. And you notice that I'm using the past tense. I'm not saying will be written, because the book at this stage is in rough draft, and I can't tell you how exciting it is to hold the stories and the history that everyone has come up with. And I do need to point out also that this is a product of the Thurston County Historic Commission, and as such, nobody is going to reap any rewards from that. It's purely a labor of love. So let me move on here. This is, we intend to incorporate this possibly in the cover of the book, which has not yet been finalized either. But this is the Upper Tumwater Falls, Olympia, Washington. And one of our authors is Don Trosper, who will be telling more in the book. So you'll just have to read it. This is just one of those little, this is sort of a tickler kind of program that Don will tell you a whole lot more about the people who came to Tumwater and to Tumwater Falls to settle. And we think that the water of that and the trees and the prairie captures the essence of it. We came up with that title, and again, we may not absolutely lock into that, but we came up with the title sitting around one day brainstorming. What do you think of when you think of Thurston County? And we thought of woods, and we thought of water, and we thought of prairies like Mima Mounds, and the prairies that drew people here, and also the land that sustained the very first people who lived here, the Native Americans. So that's what we're doing with that. The Thurston County History book will be a survey written by local authors with historical interests and backgrounds. It will be readable, historically accurate, and visually appealing. So we came up with, this is kind of like our mission statement. This is where we're going with this, and this is what we want to have happen. And of course, sponsored by the Thurston County Historic Commission. What this book is not, it's not going to be a book about family histories. Many times people will say, oh, is my grandmother in there? I've lived here, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, probably not. Though sometimes that does happen. There may be a picture that includes, the old homestead, or includes a school picture that has a family member in it. It will not be, I hope, a dry academic treatise. This is not going to be, we don't want it to be something that people will say, ooh, and put it aside. I do have to tell you just a quick story about my Lewis County book. a young man came up to me and he said, "Oh, I just love your book." He said, "I read it every night before I go to bed." And he said, "In fact, your book has put me to sleep many a night." So I choose not to have this book put anybody to sleep. I'm hoping that won't happen. And it won't be one of those image books that's just simply a series of pictures. There will be a lot of context for the photographs and the graphics that we have in it. What it will be is a piece of Northwest history. It will be readable, and in the things that I write and that I have parts of, I really am eager to portray a sense of place. And that may come from growing up on an old historic stagecoach stop in the mountains of Colorado, where I was always aware that, gosh, these people had old carriages right here, and these people put hay in this old barn, and here's the old blacksmith shop. So a sense of place to me means that you capture the feeling of people who have come here before, and what brought them here, and how they lived, and what has changed. All of those things make up, to me, what a good local history is all about. There are many components to producing a book. So when I was appointed to the Thurston County Historic Commission and introduced myself, and the next meeting I came to, there on the agenda it said, "Sandra Crowell, chair of the history book." So that's how I got involved in the project, but I'm really quite honored to do it. It's really, I couldn't ask for a better project. Anyway, the components of producing a book like this, first of all, is the content and deciding, oh my gosh, what are we going to cover? And the head, Dave Shipley, the head of the Historic Commission, had compiled a list of all the things possible that would go in a Thurston County history book. And I tell you, that was daunting. Because, as you know, there are so many places with so many specific histories, even just this building, or just the brewery, or just Gate, and there is a nice history book about Gate. Any of those places can have their own history book, so this makes it even harder because we're doing a broad brush. We're creating a survey of the whole picture. And because it is a survey, it's limited to about, we think it will be about 200 pages. So, about 225 probably, plus then the index and bibliographies and all of that. So we can't have it very, very much in depth. And if it gets too much in depth, then it loses that readability. So what we started off with is a table of contents. And I'll go over that with you in a moment. The next thing, of course, is, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for this? What's going to happen? How are we going to do that? So we do have some seed money budgeted this year from the Thurston County Historic Commission, and we'll go from there. I think sometimes going on a wing and a prayer and things just work out, you know? And that's what's happened with this. It's been somewhat of a mini miracle to me, because things have just fallen into place. It just sort of, oh, okay, we need this, and there it is, and there's this and this and this, and it just is happening. So besides that, we know that a book like this requires graphics. It requires some know-how in putting it all together so it's visually appealing. You can't just throw it out there and have text and, oh, I think I'll stick in a picture here, and it just doesn't quite work that way. So we did get a graphic artist from Seattle Media who is working with us on designing it, and he will be doing the layout of the pages and putting that part of it together for us. Then the other part is, of course, publication. You know, you want to have it, we need to have it published. But before that, I did put this circle in, and it should have been a major one, and that is editing. We do have 9 different authors, and with that, 9 different styles. So the editing is going to be a touchy business. We're at the stage where in the next month or so, we will be doing some heavy-duty editing. There's one part of editing that means editing the content, making that flow, making that fit together, and the other part is getting somebody with a sharp eye who can make sure that there isn't a comma out of place, or there isn't a word misspelled, or all of that sort of thing. Because there are errors that occur. I have to tell you, just between us here in this room, I was writing about wrote about the Sidney Ford family that settled in the Centralia area. And Sidney Ford was a very prominent person in early Washington history. And so I was very excited because the book came out on Saturday, and on Sunday I went to a Ford reunion. Oh, I was so excited, and I opened up the book, and here was a picture of the Fords, and it had the wrong name for Mrs. Ford. So, you know, those kind of things happen, and that's why the editing process is so important and so intensive, why we have to give our absolute all to that particular piece of it. Well then, after the publication, or maybe I should delve a little bit more into the publication, we anticipate producing maybe 250 copies at first, but we want the option of printing more on demand. And we want to develop a marketing plan that will be really comprehensive, that will include all of the updates, the more technological things, Facebook accounts, getting on possibly ebook publication. We haven't explored that yet, but there are so many options now for publishing. It's just really incredible. And that's another exciting and challenging piece of this process. So I want to talk to you today a lot more about content, because that's the part I think is very exciting. So this is a part of our table of contents, and this was the first part we did. We decided on what are some general topics that we can put into our table of contents. And then, amazingly, we had very qualified people step up and volunteer to write those pieces. And I say volunteer because, again, nobody is being paid, a labor of love, and people are very passionate about the parts that they are writing, which is, and very qualified. Historians, people who have written and published books. So we're very pleased about that part. But these, just as an overview, the ancient past, the original residents, early encounters, settlement, steamers, and statehood, staking out a home, claims and communities, and living off the land and water, agriculture and aquaculture, the fight for the capital, at work, Thurston County industries, and the 20th century, a turbulent age. And if you look at some of the names of those people, we went through them rather quickly, but Shanna Stevenson is a well-known historian and writer who's lived here a number of years and been involved in numerous projects. Les Eldridge has written many books about, he's written maritime history, he's written maritime fiction as well. And of course, a familiar name is Gary Alexander, the retired Supreme Court Justice. Karen Johnson, who is in the back there somewhere. Karen, she's works here in archives for the Olympia Tumwater Foundation. James Hannum has written Logging and Logging Railroads, and Drew Crooks is a well-known historian. His daughter Jennifer is working on a master's in history right now. So we have some true quality as far as authors. And if I've left off anybody, I hope I can fill that in later as we go. This is the first chapter. And the book starts off with a fictional account of what it would have been like for those first people who were moving down the coast. I have to tell you, I'm very excited about this chapter because I think it's a cutting edge theory about archaeology and anthropology, the first peoples. Dale Crows is, Dr. Dale Crows is an archaeology professor and owns his own archaeology business. He's well recognized, I would imagine, nationwide, if maybe not even further. And their theory is this, and it's called the Chehalis River hypothesis. What they are suggesting, and apparently it's becoming a rather popular, it's rising in acceptance, this theory, that, you know, we believe that people came over the landmass, that they came from Asia and went into the inner continent of North America. This theory is different and a little more local. What Dale and his fellow people here are proposing is that instead, because of the ice that blocked so many, really blocked the continent, that the people actually came down the coast, the early people. And that the first, maybe they came from Vancouver Island, the first real estuary or waterway that they would have seen would have been the Chehalis River Basin. Supposing that they came into that, and then as the ice receded, they moved into the Puget Sound area, they moved further south, and in fact were part of a major trek that peopled this part of the continent. So it is a hypothesis. I don't know how, we don't know yet how well that will hold, but the quote from the book from Dale and his helpers, the Chehalis River Valley becomes a candidate to be one of, if not the, first paths of human entry into the New World, the American continents. So, isn't that cool? I think it's just so interesting. Because it's new. I had never heard that before. So, Dale was in charge of the Mud Bay excavation, Ralph Monroe's property on Mud Bay, from 1999 to 2009. And this piece, I think, just is so enchanting. This is a tiny little kid's war club, a toy that they found in that excavation. And he wrote, "Sometimes the smallest artifact is the biggest find. A unique 2.5-inch long artifact identified as a toy war club. The discovery of a toy used in play by a child on the beach 600 years ago is a truly spectacular and very human find." And in that chapter, Dale outlines several of the finds that the baskets, fish netting, things that that do indeed date back 600 years. Dale also is a proponent of the idea that peoples in Thurston County actually were here as long ago as 14,000 years, which makes my time in Thurston County 30 years seem a little insignificant. So anyway, that's our archaeology. I'm writing the chapter on the original residents, and I have worked for a number of years in Indian country for the local tribes. There are 3 tribes that are covered in the book: the Nisqually, the Squaxin, and the Chehalis people. The Chehalis occupied the area around Grand Mound, which is, of course, in Thurston County, and part of their holdings are definitely in Thurston County. Grand Mound, incidentally, has been reclaimed by the Chehalis tribe, and it was an ancient beacon. It had no trees on it, and it was a clear marker of Chehalis territory for who knows how long. So it's nice to have the tribe regaining those ancestral grounds. This is a quote from the book. Actually, I think I had changed that on another version of my PowerPoint, but this is a quote that talks about the people of the area were decimated by diseases in the early 1800s, around the 1830s. And so as much as 90% of the tribal people were wiped out by diseases during this time. Charlene Kreis at the Squaxin Island Archives told me this story, and I just found it chilling. She said that an exhausted hunter, Indian hunter, was out and he stumbled into a camp late at night, and he saw a longhouse and a lodge, and he was so tired he went in and fell asleep. And when he woke up in the morning, he discovered everybody in there was dead, which just gave me the creeps. Woo, what a story. But there are, I think in doing that chapter, even though I'm aware of the influence of Native culture and understand a lot about it, what I came away with was just such an appreciation of the scientific basis that the people lived by, how really generations, hundreds of years of observation was so scientific. They really did understand the connections of various elements of nature. They not only were they scientists, they were horticulturists. They knew that if they burned off certain areas, of course the prairies we all know they burned off for feed for their horses and for the camas. And incidentally, have you noticed all the camas blooming now? It's beautiful. Every time I drive by that, I think of that as a major food source for the Native people, because that's what they ate, how they prepared it. They took it out and mashed it. They cooked it in cooking baskets, and then they would mash it and form it into loaves, and that was their main source of carbohydrates. When I was working at one place, I was giving training on Native American culture, and somebody spoke up and said, "Well, we don't do that in our tribe anymore. We use a crock pot." So, I thought that was pretty appropriate. It's like driving down the highway and seeing a big four-wheel drive SUV towing an ancient canoe. There's something a little odd about that. These are some of the Native people who will be featured in our upcoming book. On the left is Chief Leshai and the sad story of his hanging. The middle person is John Slocum, who was a Squaxin who founded the Indian Shaker Church, and the story behind that, how he experienced a near-death experience and came back to life with a whole renewed view of things, and decided he needed to spread the word of and I think it's Christian, but it certainly does incorporate a lot of Native beliefs. On the upper right is a Native Indian basket maker, Hazel Pete. The middle picture shows Marlon Brando, who was here fighting the fish wars in the 1960s with Billy Frank. And then Billy Frank himself, the late Billy Frank, and a tribute to him, and the fact that Billy Frank really was a hellraiser. And that's a direct quote. He was quite a wild, colorful guy, and contributed so much to the rights of Native people. And on the bottom is a part of the Indian Canoe Journey. The next part of the book will be the parts written by Les Eldridge, who's a former county commissioner and administrator at the Evergreen State College. Les has chronicled some of the early explorers. I think the most fascinating one was Charles Wilkes, Lieutenant Charles Wilkes, who did lots of exploration in this area in it's about 1840, which is very early on, obviously before statehood. And many of the things that Charles Wilkes did ended up, there were so many of them, in fact, that they built the building for the main building for the Smithsonian to house them. He had so many scientific things, and Les has included a series of scientific of the scientifics is what they called them, and their extreme qualifications, who came here very early on to provide information. And one of them was David Douglas, for whom the Douglas fir is named. So that's one interesting part of Les's chapters. The other is about the mosquito fleet. The early people in the mosquito fleet, I thought this was really interesting. They would use dogs as a guide, but they knew the dog bark, recognized the dog bark of various farmers along the route. So when they wanted to know where they were, they would just listen for the distinctive dog. So they were the dog bark navigators. This story is, again, a little bit of a colorful one, and maybe not so totally pleasant. But Butler Cove, you boaters, you know where Butler Cove is, and do you know where that is? It's part of Eld Inlet. Butler hired a Tlingit young man who was a young chief of the Tlingit tribe who came down from the north. They came to get work and to get paid for their work, so they would have some kind of cash flow. Well, when it came time, they did the work, and when it came time for the young chief to collect his money, Butler and his hired hand refused to pay them. And he said, "No, that's not right, you need to pay me." And Butler ordered him shot. Well, this was a pretty brutal thing, and they were condemned by numerous people. They never were really brought to justice by it. And Butler went on to be a steamboat pilot on this sternwheeler in the mosquito fleet. So it's one of those place name things that probably should be corrected. And I know that the Tlingit people have come here to protest what happened to their chief. And it did create a lot of unrest and was a part of the Indian Wars of 1855 and 56. Staking out a claim, a home, claims and communities, and this is a long piece, probably divided into sections, by Shanna Stevenson. And Shanna, it's been really, I think, kind of a backbreaking project. I don't know that she understood what she was committing for when she said, "Oh, I'll do that." But you know how those volunteer things go. Sometimes you think, "What did I do?" Anyway, Shanna has really, she's determined to bring her story into the history. It's really interesting, though, because there aren't very many things about women. And this one, particularly, I'm going to ask one of our audience members, Jan, would you read the next slide for us?
Near Grand Mound, several women determined to test the post-Civil War constitutional amendments empowering citizens to vote. Mary Olney Brown and her sister, Charlotte Emily Olney French, conspired along with other women in the area, notably Mercy, Mrs. Washington, Peck, to use the proverbial route to a man's heart through his stomach. They planned a picnic dinner at the Goodell's Point Schoolhouse, where a June 6, 1870 election was to be held. After the dinner, they would present their votes. Charlotte Emily Olney French spoke at the gathering. After the picnic, the women, 7 in all, handed in their ballots, which were accepted. One woman, Delilah Sargent, age 68, was especially pleased to have lived long enough to vote. Mrs. Peck's husband was an inspector of the election, which may have helped the women. Not to be outdone, the women at nearby Black River, near Little Rock, also awaited their turn. They had stationed a man on a fleet horse at the Grand Mound precinct to report if their sisters were allowed to vote. The man arrived at the polling place, waved his hat, and yelled, "They're voting, they're voting." The Black River women immediately cast their ballots, 8 in all. The women didn't succeed in changing women's rights, but made a strong point. The voting site has been marked by the Thurston County Historic Commission. Women voted during the territorial period from 1883 through 1888 and achieved permanent voting rights in 1910. Amazing. Thank you.
This is Jan Pearson, who's also a Lewis County writer and a writer of other things as well. Thanks so much, Jan. So, I took this picture the other day of the Little Rock. It's in front of the historic Rutledge Farm that was one of the early settlements, and the rock was used conveniently for people to climb on so they could get on their horses more easily, and hence the name Little Rock. That's where it came from. So there are a lot of stories about towns and many things that happened. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to go to the Tenino Museum, which is open on weekends. Excuse me. Have any of you been to the Tenino Museum? That's just a really, it's a lot of projects to be done, but gosh, it's great. And they do have a schoolhouse there, just like the Gates Schoolhouse that has been maintained so well. The Oregon Trail and the Northern Pacific Railroad both ended in Tenino. So there's a lot of stories there, and there are many stories about the marvels of the sandstone and where that went clear across the nation to various places. And there's still a sandstone carver, Keith Phillips, who's very active in that in the museum. So that's just one of the small towns. Another small town that has somewhat of an interesting story is the story of the Yelm Ditch. At the turn of the century, the citizens of Yelm put together an amazing irrigation ditch that really was quite historic. So one never knows what you're going to uncover about the interesting small communities. There's another part of this that I think is fascinating, and that's the communities that have disappeared. Tono is a good example of that. That was a mining community in South County. And there were two small other towns, Capaya and Mendota, just across the line in Lewis County, that are also just totally gone. There's not a remnant left of Tono. Gate and Bordeaux were historic communities that were associated with logging, and there's even a story in there about labor activism in the Bordeaux community. Good old nostalgia. How many remember this? It's the water. Everybody, yes. Well, certainly no story of this area would be complete without a good rundown on the Olympia Brewery. And another picture of that I thought, the steam whistle blew at Olympia Brewery every day at 5 p.m. I understand that people could set their watches by that steam whistle. And it had to have been a sad, lonely blow when it whistled its last one in 2003. This is a cartoon that Karen Johnson from this organization submitted, and it shows it's from Pogo in 1952, and Karen actually got the rights from Walt Kelly, who was the artist that put together this cartoon, and it has these three little figures in a crate that says it's the water. So that's a good indication of the national fame that Ole beer brought. The battle for the Capitol. These old photos show the revolution, really, of the Capitol, and the one that is now where SPI, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, was the Capitol at one time. And then, of course, the present Capitol, but look at the car in front of it. Logging and logging railroads. No book about this area is complete without some great big tree pictures. And this shows a logging railroad, but look at the stumps, how that's cleared out. The early settlers, many of them found the size and the scope of the timber here just to be, well, I won't say terrifying, but it was so dark and so big, and just imagine what it must have looked like. And imagine, too, what it looked like when there were mills everywhere, mills and logging railroads and logging communities. This area got its start, its push into the 20th century from logging and the lumber industry. And of course, Olympia oysters, the story of those. And I think a lot of the success, and also the not success, the demolition, really, the decline of the Olympia oysters had to do with a hearty appetite of people in San Francisco. And that was considered a way of showing wealth to serve oysters. Our last chapter in the book is The 20th Century, A Turbulent Age, and that's by Drew Crooks and Jennifer Crooks. This picture, I think, is quite charming. Aviator Fred Wiseman flew in here, and if you can look over on your right, you'll see all these people running away. But that was 1911. So when you consider the fact that the Wright brothers just started off with things in 1906, I think, the first plane. So, you know, they had advanced quite a bit to be landing in Thurston County in 1911. There was the Carline Fill was put in about this time, a little bit before, and what it did was fill in the mud flats so that many buildings could be constructed along about that time. And many towns in the Northwest really began to be built. I know the Ole Club in Centralia was built about that time. A lot of downtowns were built, and Olympia was no exception to that. And this is the courthouse in 1930 when it was brand spanking new. Look at those cars. And it was built on Capitol Way near the state capitol campus. Local labor and many locally procured materials, including sandstone, served as the county courthouse until 1997 and faced demolition, but it was saved and now houses several state agencies. The buildings that we will be showing you in this publication really do reflect the times that they were built in, and again, that sense of place, that piece of Northwest history. I really like this picture from the Procession of the Species, because in the 20th century and going on into the 21st century, there was the rise of the procession of the species, the arts culture, the theaters, all of those things that make Olympia and this area a really wonderful place to raise families. It was a turbulent time because also there were the fish wars and the rise of the Native American fishing rights, for one thing, but also the rise of casinos. And as we were writing this, we were facing the dilemma of where do we start and where do we stop? So we decided that history doesn't just stop at the end of the Civil War or the beginning of the 1900s or with statehood. History is ongoing, and it's growing, and it's alive. And that is what we are attempting to portray. And yet at the same time, we want to be careful not to date it so that somebody can pick up the book in 10 or 15 years and say, oh yeah, there it is. So that's been our goal. This is the Canoe Journey that incidentally will be this summer. The Nisqually are hosting it, and they're expecting well over 100 Indian canoes, and I believe that there's even a tribe coming from as far away as New Zealand. So that's going to be a huge event here in Thurston County. I liked this quote by Leshai, the last chief of the Nisqually. Whatever the future holds, don't forget who you are. Teach your children, your children's children, and then teach their children also. Teach them the pride of a great people. A time will come again when they will celebrate together with joy. When that happens, my spirit will be there with you. Leshai, the last chief of the Nisqually. And with that, I'm going to conclude. Thank you so much for your attention. And I'm certainly open to any questions. Anybody have any questions about this? Yes.
I'm sitting here wondering how soon I could get about a 12-hour session with you.
Will you buy lunch?
Well, my wife and I are, she is from the Gate area. I'm from Wyoming. I like Tom Horn stories, and we're writing about those or trying to get started on some stories that have been printed. And she likes the things that have happened around Gate, and she's just recently come into a huge amount of pictures and stories and letters and everything of people of that area, and then we found out something. My name is James McMillan. There was a James McMillan that toured through the Gate area, starting at the mouth of the big river, down Columbia River, and worked his way up, and he was with the Hudson Bay. His name was James McMillan as well.
Yes.
And he...
That name is very familiar. It's part of the Hudson's Bay
Yes.
exploration.
Yes, well, he indicated that there at Gate, there was one or two couples already living there in 1820 when he went through there. And so I want to get more out about that. And you when you gave that several different steps to be, I know there's steps in the steps. But I want to pick your brains about all that one day.
Well, thank you. This gentleman is from Gate. He and his wife live in Gate, and they're interested in more about how to assemble a lot of the historic materials.
Yeah.
Okay? Anyone else? Yes?
That picture you first put up, where, I know it's in the sound, but where is it?
I'm going to rely on my boaters here in the front row. Can you tell us? Sure. Just a moment, let me figure out how to get this.
Looking east at Mountain here, have you seen that Steamboat Island? Bud Inlet?
Let me see. Yeah. How can I, Don, how can I get back to the beginning here without going through all the slides?
Well, yeah.
Escape?
Can I end?
Sure. Start over.
Okay.
Should be able to end it.
Okay, several people were interested in that picture, so. This is the end. Oh, there, end slides. Okay. Yeah, go. Yeah, there we go. Good.
Yeah, there.
Yeah. Go ahead. Would you like to tell us about that? Do you want the microphone?
Yes, he wants the microphone. Thanks.
Just don't stand in front of the
For my sake.
My name's Tom Shook, and Hildy and I have been boaters in this area and farther north for 30 years or more. But anyhow, this is Mount Rainier, and I'm not sure where we are more south of Olympia, but this would be the Nisqually Reach. Oh, okay. Nisqually Reach is up here, and Henderson Bay through here, Inlet, and Dana Passage through here. In Olympia, you'd come around here, and but well, no, that's true, but the little community right there at the point. I'm an old man now. Boston Harbor, over here. And Squaxin Island, when we first came, we lived in Salem, Oregon for a lot of years and commuted up here. We take our boat and we hang on our anchor just here in a little bay off of Squaxin.
Steamboat.
Is that Hope?
Hope Island. And
Steamboat.
this goes back into Shelton.
Hammersley.
That's it. Hammersley Inlet. And I hope that helps
Where's
folks.
Steamboat Island? Which one is Steamboat
Well,
Island?
that must be here.
Yeah.
So is that a bridge?
Look, am I correct?
Yes, low tide, so you can.
Way up to the end of Steamboat Island Road, and then there's that bridge.
Let me interject just a little bit of history here, and that is that the Squaxin claimed all of this territory and had their own names for each of those inlets, and many of them had longhouses that housed many families in the early days. Any more questions? Yes.
So when is the publication of this book projected to be?
Do you want the hopeful vision or the? We are hoping that it would, we think it's possible that it will be out in November in time for the Christmas market, maybe. But I'm not going to say absolutely because it's like any project, you know, it takes on, it's sort of like remodeling, you know, you open up something and then you decide that the whole house needs to be rebuilt. So we're hoping that it will be by Christmas. If not then, January or February or March. Is that sufficiently vague? You had a question? That was the same question. Oh, okay, yes. Anything else? Well, thank you all again for coming. It was very delightful to have this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Sandy.